Hi, I'm Anna with Unreal Engine. Today, you'll see how to create materials that you can paint in blended layers on your landscape, like the rock and ground cover I used in this Forest Creek scene. So let's dive in. Let's see what we're creating. You can see that the rock material has a nice wet sheen to it, and there is no blend with the ground cover material while the rocks are under the river. Let's have another look, because here you can see that the rocks blend in naturally with the forest floor ground cover, including some rocks being partially buried and some laying on top of the ground. Let's zoom out. And here you can see that provides a great transition and dark forest floor surface for the rest of the foliage that I added to this scene. So let's see how this is done using two free fab materials. I'm using Unreal Engine 5.7.4 for this tutorial, and I already have a nice creek laid out that has the shallow water body in it. You can see my tutorials on the easy river layout and forest river for how to create a river like this. Okay, let's download the two materials that we're going to use. So let's open our content drawer and then click the Fab tab. In the search field, type in Forest Floor and hit enter. Set your price to free and then set your license to personal. And let's get this one. Set it to high quality and click add to project. Let's close this. Go back on our Fab tab and in the search box type in military trenches ground cover. And let's get this one. Now, be sure you get the ground dirt rough 02 because there is an 01. And set it to high quality. Click add to project. And let's close this. And we can close our Fab tab. Now let's test these two materials in our landscape to see the changes we might want to make to them when we recreate them as paint layer materials. So in the outliner, click landscape. Let's open our content drawer. And we're going to go to Fab, Megascans, Surfaces. And here we'll find the two of them. Let's do the forest floor one first. Click through until you get to the materials. Open that. You can just highlight it if you want to. Then over here in details, scroll down to the landscape material section, and you can hit the arrow to use the selected asset. Now as you can see, this looks nothing like what we downloaded. Let's zoom in a bit. There. Well, for one, it's too tiled, and another, it's too yellow. So let's double click on this material. Now these settings are not actually part of the material. They're saved in another file. So you'll want to make note of your changes so you can add them to the custom layer material that we'll be creating later. First, we're going to open global and then check tiling and then set it to 0.1 and hit enter. Now, I kind of like this color as it is for now. Let's have a look. I'm going to leave it this way. So let's do our rocks. Open your content drawer and let's go down to the material for the rocks. Hit high, open the material and drag that in. And you can see it really doesn't look anything like what we downloaded. So let's change the tiling and the color. Double click on it, open global again, check the box for tiling, and we're going to set this to 0.08 because we want these rocks to be a little bit bigger. And now let's change that color to open base color, check the box for base color tint, and then click on the color picker. And this is the color that I used. And click OK. Now we can close this. And there are rocks. Let's save all on this. Okay, like I said, it doesn't save it to the materials, but we need this information for later. Okay, now we'll be recreating these materials for our blended layers, so we need to know how they're connected first. Let's have a look at their textures. Open your content drawer. Let's go back up here to the forest floor. We're going to go to textures. And the last letter gives you a clue as to what it is. B is for the base color. H is for the height or displacement. N is for normal. And then ORM, it has multiple parameters in it. So let's see those parameters and how it's constructed. Let's go back to the material and double click on it. Let's open this full width and then go up to hierarchy and click that. Then click the material. This is its material graph, and you need to zoom out by scrolling your mouse wheel down, and then you can right click and drag over to see how it's constructed. Now don't freak out, this is easy. Let's look at these sections. So let's zoom in to this first one, pan down. First we have the base color, and what we're looking for here are the outputs of it, because we're going to rebuild this and it won't include all of this, don't worry about it. So we're just looking over here at the texture and its output, and you need to write these things down. So for this one, it's the RGB output that we're going to be working with. Let's pan up, and here's our ORM texture. And you can see from it, we have red that goes to ambient occlusion, which is AO. And then we have G that goes to roughness, B to metallic. Let's pan down. Here's our normal node, and the RGB goes to normal. And then down here at the end, we have displacement, and the R goes to displacement. So let's close these two tabs. And let's have a look at our rocks. So open your content drawer, go to the rocks material, double click on it. Go to hierarchy and click on that, and then the material. Zoom out and pan over. And let's have a look at these. The base color output, the ORM, the normal, and the displacement are all exactly the same as the ground cover material, but yours may not be, so you need to have a look at it. Okay, now that we know how our materials are connected, let's create the new master material that will contain our blended layers. So we can close both of these tabs and open our content drawer. Scroll up to your content folder, and then we're going to right click and choose material. And I'm going to name mine My Material and hit enter. Now let's double click to open the new material. And as you can see, we have the My Material node highlighted. We won't need anything in there but that output. It's our master output. So over in your left sidebar, find Use Material Attributes and check that to minimize it. And at this point, we want to save all. So do File and Save All. Now let's create our Material Attributes node, and it'll look a lot like this, but we need one for each material. I'm going to right click and drag this down a bit. We're going to create the first one right here. Right click and then type in Make and find the one for Make Materials Attributes and click on that. And since we're going to have two materials, we want to copy it, so I'm going to zoom out just a bit. It's already highlighted. Hit Control C and then Control V and click and drag the header of this one down. And we're going to put this one sort of in the center of it. And now let's bring in the textures from both of our materials, and we're going to connect them to these Make Material Attribute nodes. So let's get our ground cover first. Open your content drawer, and let's go to the forest floor. We're looking for the textures. Click on that. Click the first one, hold Shift, click the last one, and then click and drag them in. And you'll want to separate these out. If you can grab the header, yeah, it always grabs that first one. Then pull this down and just stack them in the same order that you pull them out. There we go. And now we need to connect them to the Make Material Attributes node based on the info that you previously gathered. So here's our base color, and that was the RGB, comes out to base color here. The next one is ORM, and it had a lot of things. For the red, we're going to pull that out and connect it to ambient occlusion. And then G, we're going to click and drag over to roughness. And then B, click and drag to metallic. Then for normal, we have the RGB that we're going to click and drag to normal. And for displacement, it was on the red. Click and drag that to displacement. It's that easy. Okay, let's pan down. We're going to do the same thing for our rocks. Open your content drawer. Scroll down to your rocks and the textures. Click on the first one, hold shift, click on the last one, click and drag, and bring them up. And let's move them around. Whoops. All right, I'll show you a trick. To move all of them, you can draw a box around them and grab any one of them and click and drag. And let's pull this down. And we're going to hook these up the same way. For the base color, it's RGB to base color. For the ORM, the red goes to ambient occlusion. The G goes to roughness. And the B goes to metallic. For normal, RGB goes to normal. And for displacement, the red goes to displacement. Okay, now we have our two materials all hooked up, but we need to blend them and then output them. So for blending, we want to create another node right here, which is the landscape layers node. I'll zoom in a little bit, right click, and type in landscape. Land will probably do it. Find the one for landscape layer blend and click that. This is what does our blending, but we have to tell it what layers we have. So over here in the left sidebar, you'll see layers. Click that twice on the plus sign to add your two layers. And now let's give them names. So on index 0 layer, we're going to call that ground cover. You can call yours whatever you like. Hit enter. On index 1, I'm going to call this river rocks and hit enter. And you can see those names have now appeared in our landscape layer blend node. I'm going to move this down a bit. So now we want to take that output of where we've connected our textures, click and drag that into the appropriate layer. This is our ground cover. And we'll do the same thing for the rocks down here to our river rocks layer. And now we need to output the two of these to our master output. So click and drag that over to material attributes. And then we need to save what we've done. And this is very important. In the top left, you need to click apply. I don't know that you have to click this save, but we're going to do it anyway. And then up here at file, click save all. Now, that's all we need for our basic materials. So let's add them to our landscape, and then we'll do some test paints. So I'm going to minimize this. Actually, I'm going to close it. Open your content drawer, and we're going to add this thing just like we do any other landscape material. Scroll up to content or wherever you added your My Material folder, and click and drag it in. Let's zoom out. And yes, your landscape will turn black because we don't have any layers assigned to it yet. So let's do that now. In the top left, go to landscape mode. Click on the paint tab. And as you can see at the bottom, we have a place to add our layers. So if you don't see this little button for create layers from assigned materials, then drag this out a bit until you see it. Click on that. And what do you know? There are two materials, but they're not assigned yet, so there is one more step. Click on the plus sign. This actually creates the layer info. It's going to show you where it's saving it. So click save. It's going to open the content drawer and close that with Control Spacebar. And then we need to do it again for our river rocks. It will do the same thing. Click save. Now you can see these two things are not saved yet. Let's do that. So go up to File and Save All. Now before we add tiling and tint, let's test what we've already created to make sure everything works. So I'm going to move over here to a corner of the landscape. Let's go up just a bit. That's good. And we're going to set our brush size down to about 500. We'll leave all the other settings as they are. So let's select our first layer. Just click on it. And we're going to draw a few stripes. So I'm going to put in pretty heavy a stripe of our ground cover. Just make it heavy. And then another stripe. We're going to blend them here. And then go down to the rocks and let's create a stripe of those. And let's make them pretty heavy. Okay. And let's do one right down the middle here for blending. So let's zoom in here and see what we've got. So we have our tiling at the default and the color at the default. And same thing with our rocks. Then you can see how they blend. And you kind of have to look at the edges to see how they're blending. It kind of fades out. But at least we know everything works. Okay, so I double clicked on my material and I've set up this split screen here so we can easily see the changes we'll be making to the materials for tiling and then color. Plus, we'll take care of this shiny plastic looking coating that's on our material too. So let's do the tiling first, and we need 3 new nodes for that. So I'm going to pan over because we want to do our ground cover first. The first new node we need is a landscape layer coordinate. So we want to right click here and type in landscape and find the one that's landscape layer coords. Click that. Leave it be for now. Then the next one that we need is a parameter node. So hold S and click. Not right click, just regular click. And they'll put some S's in there. Take those away. And let's name this ground scale. Hit enter. And this is where we set our value. We know from our previous test that we want our scale to be 0.1 and hit enter. Click anywhere to deselect the one you've got and then hold M and click. This is a multiply node. I'm going to pan over a little bit. Let's actually bring these two over this way. And we're going to move this one right in between them. Connect the output of the landscape coords to the A input of multiply. Then the output of the parameter to the B input of multiply. And then connect the output of the multiply to the UV of every one of the textures. I'll put it up here. Okay, now we're ready to test. Watch what happens to our ground cover when I hit apply. Boom. Let's move over a little bit so you can see. Let me move all the way over to just the ground cover. See, it's got the right tiling. Okay, now let's do the same thing for our rocks, and to make it easy, we can just copy these 3. So click and drag a box around them, hit Control C, then pan down to your rocks, click where you want this thing, and hit Control V. And there they are. And here we would set our default value. It's a little bit different. It's 0.08. And hit enter. And then connect these outputs to the UV inputs. And then watch the rock material when I hit apply. And that's perfect. Okay, let's save all. And now let's create those tint nodes. Now, I like the color of the ground just like it is. Not with this shiny stuff, which we'll get to later. But the rocks are going to be underwater, and I want to make them a lot darker. So, let's zoom out. I want to move all of these, whoops, not that one. All of these rock nodes down. Draw a box around them, because I want to create things right here. So we need 4 new nodes to recreate the base tint that we applied at the beginning of this tutorial. And I think I want to move these over. So I'm going to put it right here. All right, let's zoom into there. The first one we'll need is a blend overlay node. So here we want to right click and type in blend, overlay, and click that. I'm going to move this over a bit. And we're going to disconnect the output of our base color from our master material attributes. So just hover over the base color here, hold Alt on your keyboard and click. That will disconnect it. We're going to put this one right in between them. So click and drag the RGB output into base, and then the result to base color. So that's the first one. And now we need to assign a new color. For that, we need to create a vector 3. So hold 3 on your keyboard and click. And now we can double click on the color. And we can use our color picker to input our new color. And it should be in here, so you can just click that. Whoops, that's not the one I want. I want this one. And click OK. And it should show the color there. I'm going to move this down. And we also need to create an intensity node to tell it how strong to make the color. I'm actually going to move this up a little bit and put it down here. Hold 1 on your keyboard and click. And we need to set this value to 1.0. And now we need to tie these two things together with a multiply node like we used before. So hold M and click. And on the color, do the white output to A. And our value into B. And then we're going to take the output from this one and tie it into our blend overlay. That's all there is to it. Now, watch what happens to the rocks when I hit apply. Yep, there it is. And these blend colors look a little funky right now, but we're going to get rid of that sheen. They'll be okay. Let's go look at the rocks. Love this. They look nice and wet. But we do want to take a little bit of that sheen off. So let's do that next. Now this shininess can be controlled by several parameters depending on what material you're using. Those include things like specular, roughness, and metallic. So you'll need to check your material if you're using something different than in this tutorial to see which one has the most effect or reflected light. But for this specific ground material, it's roughness. So let's pan up here for our ground material. And there are several nodes that we could add to do this, but I'm finding that the clamp node is the easiest for me at this time, so that's what we're going to use. And we're going to increase the roughness of the material so it's flat. So right click and type in clamp, click clamp, and we're going to set the minimum to 1, which is as high as it can go, and leave the max set to 1. Now, we need to break one of our connections here for roughness. It goes to G. So hover over roughness, hold Alt on your keyboard and click, and then take the G output of the ORM and put it to the input of the clamp. Take the output of the clamp and put it into roughness. And let's scoot all the way over here to just our grass so we can see it. And watch what happens when I hit apply. And boom. And all that shiny is gone except on the very edges, and that'll be okay when we do a fresh paint. Now let's do the same thing for our rocks. I'm going to pan down here. And we have room to put that little clamp in here, so right click, type in clamp. Now I don't want to take all the shiny off my rocks because I want them to look wet. So I'm going to set the minimum up to 0.7, and we're going to leave the max to 1. Then we need to disconnect. Let me pan over a little. We need to disconnect roughness. So hold Alt and click on that. And then take the G, go into the input of the clamp, output of the clamp to roughness. And let's move all the way over to our rocks. See how wet they look. Let's see what happens when I hit apply. So they still look plenty wet, especially on the edges where we paint, but they look a lot drier in the center, and this will be okay when we do a fresh paint. Don't worry about that too much. Okay, let's do a save all. Okay, let's move back over to our blended section, because we have options with blending the materials better, depending on the materials that you use, how many materials that you have, and I wouldn't go over 4 for sure, and where they'll be placed in your landscape. Now, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do the blending. Some of them will not look good on these materials, but that doesn't mean they won't work on your materials, and they may change depending on how you're going to paint them. So don't count these things out. First, we're going to do alpha blend. So we're going to pan over here to go up to our landscape layer blend. And we're going to click on that. Then bring out our sidebar a bit. And you can see that the blend type of both of these is set to LB weight blend by default. Now, to get the secondary material to completely cover the base material, you can change the blend type on it to alpha blend. Watch what happens to the rocks when I hit apply. You can see they're entirely on top. And this is the blend setting that I used for my river landscape. Now, the other way to do this is with the height map of the materials. And don't confuse this with the height map of the landscape, or how some auto materials change the higher you go up in the landscape. This is strictly on the height of the material itself. In this landscape layer blend node, we can switch the blend type on both of them to height blend. And that will create new pins in the node. And here's how you do the connection. Let's collapse this a little bit and bring this down and pan over. So you can see here we have our height into displacement. You're going to leave that one as it is, but you're going to also take it out and put over here to the height for the ground cover. I'm going to zoom out, pan up. Then we're going to do the same thing for the R of our rocks and go into that height on the landscape layer blend node. Now let's focus on these blend as I hit apply. And these materials are now mixed based on their height, and the higher rocks are sticking out of the lower ground cover a lot more. Okay, one last thing. To erase these materials, at the time you create them, you can just hit Control Z, of course. But if you want to actually erase something later with the erase tool, let's do save all on this and I'll show you. Let's minimize this, pull this back over, and go into landscape and paint. Now, as you can see, there's no erase tool in landscape paint. Instead, you're going to want to hold shift and click and drag over the painted area, and it will only remove the layer that's highlighted. So here in our blend, we've got the rock selected. I'm going to hold shift, and you can see it's only taking out the rocks. Okay, I'm going to set my layer blend back to the way I want it. I'm going to set it to weight, and this one to alpha, and apply, and close this material. I'm going to set my brush size way up, hold shift, and see if I can get rid of all of this. That's all the rock. Let's get the ground cover. Okay, now let's paint this ground cover. And because of the way I've got my settings done, we can paint the whole thing without being considerate of the riverbed. So I've got ground cover selected, got a big brush, just paint everywhere, and make sure that you're painting it heavy enough that the influence of the brush doesn't leave shallow edges on there. That's fine. Go over the whole thing. Alrighty, let's do a save all. And now let's paint these rocks. I'm going to go down to a bookmark that I already have. Actually, I'm going to go up here, and we're going to paint a swatch down the middle of the river. So select rocks. Let's set this brush size down to about 600. Yeah, that's about right. I'm just going to go down the center of my river. And back up a bit. Go all the way down. That's good. All right, now for these, because I want this really heavy in rocks. Now, for these banks, I'm going to go back to this bookmark. For these banks, I want it to blend a little bit, so I want you to see what happens here. I'm just going to click once. See how we've got a little bit of rock? I'm just clicking once. Now, the longer I hold it, the darker that gets. See how that works? So I'm going to click and drag down. I don't want it that heavy on the bank, so I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm just going to start dotting this in to make it transition. And you can set your brush size way down to get even pickier about it. I'm going down to about 200. And you can get super picky about how it lays it in. The other thing that you can do is change the influence of your brush. So set the fall off. And look at my brush here. See the big circle on the interior? If I set this way up, that circle gets a lot smaller. That means my brush can't influence as much. So you can get real tight on this as you go. And you can almost lay in rocks as thick or as little as you want to. Let's have another look at my final landscape using these layered materials. And you can see how nice and wet these rocks look even along the banks. Let's get another view of it. And you can see how I laid in the rocks heavy by the water and then dotted them in as it approached the ground. It looks naturally blended. Let's zoom out just a little bit. And you can see that the ground cover looked too green when we started, but when I set up my lighting for this scene, it has a nice brown forest floor look. I sure hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on creating custom materials to paint your landscape. Be sure to subscribe to this channel and see other tutorials for creating rivers with the type of foliage and trees that are in this scene too.